Alright guys, please excuse my cold that I developed yesterday, but hopefully I can at least get through what I need to cover with this. So I did have this in, not really a primer, but just the vinyl dye, just to kind of give it a quick cover, and that's what you saw probably last time as I was checking the bodywork just to ensure everything was good to go. And I just wasn't really happy with everything. While the bodywork was nearly completed, most of the finished work was done with this Bondo glaze putty, which is good for filling in pinholes and scratches and stuff like that, and small irregularities. But there's just a spot, especially right here, where there's a bit of a low spot, and so it wasn't thick, but it did cover up a fairly substantial area right in here that I just was a bit hesitant of, because it was right next to this screw mount, and so I didn't want any torquing or any movement from installing or removing the screw just over the course of the rest of its life to end up flexing and causing any kind of cracking or anything. Also, there's two joints right here in the body, and I just, there again, wasn't really happy with the idea of there being two spots where it was just a butt joint, two pieces next to each other, and we're relying on just the thickness of the plastic itself, just this little bit here to holding together as the body flexes and stuff like that, as it's used, stored, moved around, stuff like that. And so I went through and bead blasted the entire thing in a blast cabinet with the glass beads, so that it would remove the paint and the filler, but wouldn't affect the base plastic. And so it got rid of all the body filler and everything else, took it right down to plastic again. And I came through with a very, very small round bit in my Dremel. Let's see if I can focus on that. Just a very small round burr, and basically drew over all the joints, and then also some other areas and stuff where there's just a little bit of paint left over, and other little things like that. Where I had little bubbles close to the surface, and so I just basically what I did when I ground out the top of the joint was so that instead of having two pieces buttered up next to each other and relying on just the surface in between them, which was a very tight fit, so there wasn't much adhesive in there, by creating kind of a channel, like this between the two, I'm able to fill up that whole trough with the DevCon towards when it's flat. There's a lot more surface area holding the two joints, the two pieces of the joint together. And I'll probably cover that more. I do need to do just a basic DevCon video and just discussing how the pieces relate and fitting and just the gluing pieces as they relate to each other. So there'll be more on that at a later date. But that's what these are here, and all these other joints. I just wanted to ensure everything was extra strong, especially in the middle of the body where there's going to be a lot of flexing and stuff, especially if it's laid sideways in a box, or if it's stored, or it gets something set on it. I didn't want it cracking down the middle. I probably wouldn't have, but I also just didn't want to have, especially that little bit of glaze putty that was in there was thin enough. I didn't want it to crack or just have. I just was very unhappy with it. And so what we have here is basically down to the base plastic again, finishing up the bodywork. A few other there's a pinhole and pinhole. I want to redo this area here where we had those other pieces fit in there, just because there's so much going on in there. I'm thinking what I might do is overlay a new piece, very, very thin piece, probably with some of this thin styrene or something like that, and just lay it in there and just do a single uniform seam all the way around it, just to kind of even that all out, because I just wasn't happy with how it was. I wasn't happy with it. So we'll be doing that as well relatively soonish. I did add a few shims here where the mag release fits, just to ensure that it's not too wobbly. Still need to finish up just a little bit of body work here, just to close in the gap around the mag release. A little bit more there. Just very, 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 very small things right now. So next step is going to be just, like I said, just finish body work, The electrical system is complete. I just have to do the final joints, solder joints on that, but I can't do that until the shell's coming together, just because of how the wiring has to fit. So that'll be, I don't believe I actually discussed the electrical system itself. That'll probably be in a separate video discussing what is what and how I came to whatever conclusions, but this at least gets us kind of up to speed on what the body works. What's going on with bodywork right now.
Okay guys, bodywork continues. Just filling little holes. I had some irregularities that I tried filling with regular glaze putty, but it was too big of an area that I just wasn't comfortable with the structuralness of this. I don't mind using this for scratches and pinholes, but it was getting a little too big. So I have been going back with DevCon and filling up some of these spots and some more of the irregular areas through there. But one thing that I was noticing, like there's a spot in here that was kind of a pain in the neck to work with because it's in a hole and there's irregular areas to work with. And it was just really hard to get this whole area filled and smoothed. So what I ended up doing was making a pattern out of just a piece of stiff paper and just set it in there and trimmed it down. Took a piece of my sheet styrene and cut it to fit and squeezed it in there. And so I'll be able to come back through with just a little bit of glaze putty just to blend in the corner here. And this will be a whole lot better looking than having a lot of wavy stuff in here. Came up with another spot here where there used to be kind of a raised section in here that I didn't like, as well as the area that was affected by the consolidation of the body. And so I ended up with, kind of a weird spot here, and when I was sanding down, I cheated and tried to use the Dremel for this area here. And so I've got some real slight wavy, kind of, there again, more just irregularities in the surface. So to help fix that and to just give it a little extra charm, I guess, I used some of the same textured styrene that I used for the handle scales on the Centeride here. If you can see that it's got these little grooves in it, just gives it a little extra cool. Used some of that to fill in this panel. I just sized it up. I didn't have to use a template because it was just a very nice flat, flat top, flat bottom. I was able to just come through and just, with the panels being scored, you can just flex it a little bit and it'll break on the line. So then I just had to come back with sandpaper just to clean up just the slight weird spots there. So I have those in there, and that's going to fill up any weirdness there and give it just a little extra uniqueness. Also considering, because we have such a weird issues here in this area, because we have this panel and this little filler piece and all this other weird stuff, I'm thinking about coming through with, I had another template, here we go, that I just started roughing out. Got this angle here. I'm thinking about, there again, using this textured stuff to match this and just fitting it up in here to cover up the panel from here up and around, and probably pull this straight across and just leave this little thing kind of coming out underneath, kind of the way it does here, where you have like this higher surface centered up a little bit. A bit of a higher surface here, and then it drops down to kind of this panel here. Basically do the same kind of thing, only this panel will, not sure whether to, because one thing I noticed is that this panel here isn't as tall as it is on this side, which is very unusual. There's no reason that I know of that it should be different, but even though it's the same shape, this one is taller. So my original plan was to have this piece fit underneath, and you'd have kind of a smooth panel here that was maybe slightly above. The ribbed panel would be here. But on this side, I think this comes to about the same level. So what I might end up doing is just using some more styrene, probably this thinner stuff, and filling up this area here to where it's the same as this area, and just running it all the way across. I still have yet to trim this down, and then I'll just transfer it over to the ribbed stuff and build that new panel and blend it in. That way, instead of right now we have so many weird areas to work with that I think in the course of sanding it's just going to get wavier and wavier, and it's really hard to get into such a confined area and block it out so it's nice and flat. So I'm essentially going to create a new panel in this area that all you have to do is blend in the very outside edge, which will be infinitely easier. Okay, and just like that, we now have the textured panel in there, which is going to be a whole lot easier to, just clean up the outside edge than it will be to try to treat the whole surface in there. I'm considering doing a actual video on dealing with styrene for doing these panels, and actually mostly for these handle scales. I do have kind of a brief overview on my Instagram and Facebook, kind of a series of pictures with an explanation, but for those of you who prefer a actual video format for something like that, go ahead and leave a comment below and just say, yes, I want a video on that, or whatever. And yeah, so now that I have all of my panels in place, now I'll come back and actually putty up the edges, and then we'll start doing a little bit of sanding.